And Dunedin's a place, the ballpark's pretty old, and it's one of those places where literally the neighborhood, like families, are sitting out in their front lawn, and they're like, here, park here, $3. And now that was years ago. I don't know if Frank, is it still like $3 to park on some lady's lawn out there?
It's up to $5 now for the lawn parking, but and I did just eat at the Dunedin Smokehouse after the game. So.
Did you? Did you say hi to Pam?
I sure did. She waited on me great.
All right, there you go. Well, the Phillies in Dunedin today, they took on the Blue Jays in a 2-1 loss to Toronto to kick off the Grapefruit League portion of the schedule. Not a lot of offense today, but I want to start with the pitching here, Frank. Who was it? Pivetta getting the start today, and he's one of those guys that is in a battle for those final 2 spots in the rotation. So if we were grading him on his opportunity, how he handled his opportunity today, give us your thoughts on Pivetta today.
It's hard to say in the spring because you don't really know what they're working on with their pitches this early. Now, he gave up a leadoff home run to Curtis Granderson, and then he had a couple little hits after that, and he only went 2 innings. The second inning was for the most part fine, but still kind of early to tell. And right behind him, you had Mark Leiter Jr., who pitched the next 2 innings, which is pretty much what the starters tend to pitch the first time out. So, and he looked pretty good, but he's so far okay. I don't think there's enough. There's a big enough body of work to make a decision one way or the other this early.
Would you say that Pivetta and Leiter are in competition with each other, or in competition for 2 spots?
Well, I think that Leiter probably ends up in the bullpen as a long man if he makes the team. I think they're going to stretch him out as if he were going to start this year, but I think he's kind of further down on the Phillies list at this point anyway. I mean, he could pitch himself into something, but I tend to think that if you have to go to Leiter, you've kind of struck out on a few other guys that I think that they're hoping step up at this point.
Frank Klose in Dunedin with the Phillies losing to the Blue Jays today. It was Pivetta and Leiter. Another interesting name, and you could tell us some of the guys in the bullpen that came out, but obviously K-Rod, a minor league rostered guy that's trying to make this team. But what did you see from him today? Because he's obviously one of the bigger names that threw in the game today.
His first outing wasn't all that impressive. He came out, he walked the first batter. He was a little bit all over the place. Now, he got out of the inning thanks to a double play. So I would just say, for the most part, he did not look too great this early in camp.
He's a guy who was a power pitcher, saved a bunch of games. He gave a passionate quote today, that he didn't buy all those saves and he still loves doing it. But I know you only
87 to 89 isn't going to get it done.
Right, I was going to say, I know that he might be a long shot to make this team, but if you were just going off of today's performance, did he look like he had the pop? Did he look like he had a live arm still? Does he look like a guy who's at the end just trying to maybe impress one more team?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it. I think he's at the end of the road, and he's just trying to see if he's got one more shot left in the major leagues. And I even went over and was watching him warm up even before he came in, and I don't think that he had much left in the tank, which, I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know how much he's thrown lately. He looks like he's put on a little bit of weight since I saw him pitch last. So we'll see where it goes. I know they're not going to only give him one chance to decide based off of that, but the early returns don't seem to be that great.
Frank, as I look up and down the box score, it looks like of the regular names, Nick Williams, the only one that had a good day?
Yeah, he had a double, which looked pretty good, and but really, in terms of the regulars, there weren't a lot of them in the lineup, but Williams did indeed. A couple hits looked pretty good. He got thrown out at third on one play, but other than that, I mean, really, they were playing the likes of Andrew Pullen and for most of the game. Players that probably aren't going to make an impact in 2018, but you did get at least a little glimpse of Cameron Rupp. He did start the game. I know this is a big spring for him because this is basically make or break it for Rupp. With Alfaro and Knapp both on the roster, Rupp may not be a Philly at the end of spring training. So he did get the catch, and I think they wanted to see him work with some of these pitchers too, and see if he has it either at the plate or behind the plate. So he's kind of auditioning in both regards at this point.
Yeah, Frank, I want to go back to some of the pitching real fast because, K-Rod, a bigger name. Leiter got some time. Leiter last year, by the way, if you look at his numbers, they were pretty good at over a strikeout an inning. We talked about Pivetta, but any of the other pitchers that threw today, do you think have a shot or are intriguing in this bullpen mix? Because, man, when you look at this bullpen for the Phillies, you got about 15 arms really competing for about 8-9 spots?
Yeah, so Ricardo Pinto got an inning. He looked pretty good. I think I was talking to someone down at the ballpark too about him, and he was really rushed last year. I mean, he does still have some talent, and even though Pinto didn't really show a whole lot early, I think that's important to watch going forward. I don't know if he'll make the opening day roster, but he does have a live arm, and whether or not he can do something with it, should make such a difference. Victor Arano got to pitch one. We saw him in Philadelphia a little bit last year, and he looked pretty good so far. His inning was a quick 1-2-3 inning. And Hobie Milner did walk one, but he did throw a scoreless 8th inning against the Blue Jays. So Milner is going to be up with Adam Morgan. They just brought Abad in as another lefty option. So it's important for him to have a good camp, Hobie Milner, especially since he did have some success. But again, he's somebody that might have come up on the earlier end of the plan, and so it's important for him to have a good spring. But between Arano, Pinto, and Milner, the three straight scoreless innings. They got 3 from Leiter. 2 innings from Leiter with 2 strikeouts. To mention your strikeout per inning, numbers. So they all look pretty decent, but we also must remember at the same time that by then the Toronto Blue Jays put their subs in later in the game. So it's really kind of hard to tell early on.
Frank, we mentioned there's about 15 arms. Abad is a guy they just brought in. He's another veteran. You got Neris, Neshek, Hunter. After those 3, are there any guys that you think definitively are in this bullpen, or do you think there is competition for the rest of the slots in this bullpen?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of competition, and I still think there's a chance that a starter like Pivetta could find himself in the bullpen as well. Now, I would add one name to your bullpen locks, in Luis Garcia. I think he's pretty good to go as a 4th arm in that bullpen. So we're up to 4 at that point, and probably Morgan and Milner are the favorites at this point. We'll have to see how Abad pitches in spring training, but at that point you're up to 6, and that only leaves a spot or 2 left, and they're probably hoping that of the Aranos, of the Pintos, of the likes of Middlebrooks Ramos, who is somebody who's got some talent and was all over the place. Yaxel Rios, who was with the Phillies last year. I think those types of guys will be competing for that last spot. And of those names, they have a lot of live arms, and it's even true with the same kind of situation with the starting rotation. There's talent, and the people that just need to make that talent work, whoever is able to make it work is going to rise to the top.
Yeah, because you just mentioned Pivetta, but there's Ben Lively, Zach Eflin, Jake Thompson.
No relation.
Drew Hutchinson. Those are guys who are competing for starting spots that theoretically could work out of the bullpen too. So it seems that there is a lot of competition for, not a whole heck of a lot of spots.
Yeah, competition's good. I mean, it's better to let the best rise to the top, and it's also not terrible if some people go down to AAA angry and have a chip on their shoulder and something to prove. So that as we saw last year, there are injuries all the time, and even among some of their young players. So you always need more arms than actually make the club. So it would be nice if they have some talent at AAA that they can bring in and avoid what was really the problem in the last couple of years is those disaster games where your starters go out early and then the bullpen gets taxed, and then you're forced to go get another arm at AAA, and then that disrupts a whole lot of different players. So I think they want to avoid that this year. So if they can have a steadier crew in the major leagues, and if they're forced to do that, hopefully that they have somebody who's equally competent to just swap out when they have to go to AAA for an arm.
Frank, since we're talking bullpen with Frank Klose here on 97.3 ESPN and talking Phillies bullpen, what's Gabe Kapler indicated about his thoughts on how the bullpen should work? Because I've seen some comments where the newer managers out there are saying, look, let's not have defined roles. Let's just plug a guy in when he's ready.
Yeah, and actually that's something where I thought he was going to go, and Kapler actually said something to that effect the other day, that he doesn't see any defined roles necessary. He'll work matchups. Now that could be a big shift for the players too, because you used to hear for years, like Ricky Batalico, for example. He used to speak of people relievers liking to know when it's their turn to come into the game. So. But I would expect him to use whatever he thinks works at that time. So you may never actually hear somebody declare the closer. And if he thinks Hector Neris is the best arm in the bullpen, and you've got the best opposition hitters in the 8th inning, then he'll pitch him in the 8th inning, and maybe you'll see someone like Nishak in the 9th. But it seems to be the way the game's going. More and more managers are buying in, and it's just important, though, you get the players to buy in on that. So you're finding the right relievers that, Andrew Miller and the Cleveland Indians really kind of revolutionized that. Once the Indians acquired Miller from the Yankees, Miller was pitching all up and down the game, and that led to the Indians' success down the run, down in that stretch run as they need the World Series. So I think that's kind of setting a new trend, and it seems like Kapler is on board with that.
And to your point about the players buying in on that, you remember last year that Joaquin Benoit criticized the team. He said the relievers never knew when they were going to pitch, so maybe the younger pitchers in the bullpen will be more apt to buy in than a veteran player who likes the set routines and things like that.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because Benoit is from the old school, and let's face it, he's 40 years old. And he actually did get a new deal. Who was it? I think who signed him the other day? I think it was the Royals. But yeah, the young guys, if you can get them in from the ground level, and they can buy into that, and I think when you point to the success a lot of teams have, if you can get the right person to communicate that success that they had to these guys, I think it'd be a lot easier to get them on board, because who doesn't like to win?
So, Frank, is there a lot of competition for closer, or is this Hector Neris' job, speaking of defined roles? And who would be considered for the closer spot if it's not Hector Neris?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be shocked if they never say such and such as a closer, but I think Neris is kind of the top reliever at the moment. There still are some free agents out there. We've probably talked about the Phillies maybe jumping on Arrieta if he falls into their lap. The likes of Greg Holland is still out there. I'd like to see the Phillies maybe take a shot on somebody like him who has that closing experience and gives them another option. But it seems like if you had to rank the relievers in order of importance, I would put Neris at the top. And while he may not rack up saves in the traditional sense the way that he'll be used, I definitely think they consider him their relief ace at this point.
Frank Klose is in Dunedin with the Phillies today. They lost to the Blue Jays 2-1, which means not a whole heck of a lot of offense. As Pete mentioned, Nick Williams was really the one guy who got on the board today. But, the Phillies lineup, we kind of talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Frank. It seems like it's pretty set, right? You've got Alfaro, Santana, Hernandez, Crawford, Franco, Hoskins, Herrera, and then probably a platoon in right field. So, what are some of the, roster spots behind that?
Yeah, so whoever is not going to start as in the outfield would be your first bench spot. Phillies have actually talked about going as many as 8 relievers, which would not give you that big a bench. That's why I think they're really looking at the guys like Pedro Florimon, Adam Rosales, guys that can play infield and outfield. That's why Roman Quinn took some ground balls at shortstop so far. Be interesting to see if they give him any opportunities in game action. Scott Kingery, although he played second base today, played some third base. I think they're hoping that whoever is on the bench is going to be a versatile player. So while the likes of Williams and Altair are clearly basically just outfielders, whoever's behind them is going to be somebody probably who can play some infield, who can play some outfield, and that kind of remains to be seen. A lot of them are on non-roster invitee contracts, like Rosales and Quinn. He could go up and down. So really, they're all kind of competing for the opportunity to do a lot of different things. in the way that in the past you saw the likes of Andres Blanco bounce around the diamond. But I think whoever is the fifth outfielder is probably also going to be a backup infielder.
Yeah, and you mentioned Quinn. I mean, he's a guy that I'm intrigued by him because he was a guy that Philly seemed to like, and it seems like he's kind of, I don't know, you could tell us better what they think about him, but it seems like he's kind of fallen out of, I don't want to say fallen out of favor, but fallen out of their thoughts as maybe being an everyday guy.
Yeah, well, I think that at this point, he's been injured so often that it's really hard to count on him. So, you don't want to build a roster where you count on Roman Quinn being an everyday player if he's going to get hurt. And even right now, I think they kind of still don't know what to do with him. I think that they're thinking that if he's a bench player and he doesn't play that often, maybe he'll keep himself healthier. But a lot of that remains to be seen because it seemed like last year would have been his real opportunity to step up and earn a roster spot, especially since they struggled so much in the outfield. And I remember Michael Saunders was with them, and then they had to release him, and they didn't necessarily have anybody to replace them. And, the roster spots going to the likes of Brock Stassi and Daniel Nava could have been his, and he was hurt. So really, he has to show he's healthy, and then I think at this point they're just waiting for him to show the team that he has anything, and then if he does, at that point they can decide where they can put him. But he's kind of hard to keep in their plans because it seems like every time you turn around he's hurt, which is very unfortunate because when they drafted him in the second round, they believed he's somebody who's got a lot of tools. I mean, he's a switch hitter, he's got speed, and he'd be a really nice. He seems like he profiles like he could be a very nice major league outfielder, and unfortunately he just hasn't had the opportunity to step up and claim a spot.
Hey, Frank, any long shot guys or names that you're keeping an eye on or that intrigue you while you're down there?
Right now, the one I would do is Tom Eshelman. He's not expected to be in the Phillies rotation this year, but like we were just saying, some of the others that are competing for these positions just haven't really stepped up yet. Now he is not on the 40-man roster just yet, so he would have to be somebody who really impresses because he will cost them another player in the organization who's on the 40-man. But he's got a lot of talent. At this point, he's 24 years old in this coming June. So he's kind of running out of minor league life left. So if he steps up and is ready, I wouldn't be shocked if the Phillies ran with him. But he is kind of a long shot at this point. Another long shot that you might want to look at too is J.D. Hammer. Everybody seems to remember him because of his name. They got him in the Pat Neshek trade, but after that trade, he just really lit it up in the Philly system. And then he went to the Arizona Fall League and lit it up there. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens in spring trading, how much he gets to pitch, and if he impresses and other guys aren't stepping up, I would consider him a dark horse bullpen candidate.
Real quick, Dylan Cousins is a name that I guess he'll be like the next prospect that we'll be hearing about this year. I'm interested to see, number one, how he looks, because I know he was 0 for 2 today with a couple of strikeouts. Number two, that outfield's pretty crowded. They signed Santana, so does Cousins have a future in the organization?
That's a really, really good question. After watching Cousins last year, I don't tend to think he's that much of a prospect. I think it's too soon to write him off. But last year, I thought he struck out too much. I didn't see the bat speed that he had the year before. Some guys they get up to AAA, and AAA has many former major league relievers that are a definite step up from the guys in AA that are still raw. And sometimes players like Dylan Cousins just can't cut it once they face them. So this is a big spring for him to show that he should be in the Phillies' plans. He certainly is. His chance isn't over. So I think Dylan Cousins has a real opportunity here. But at the end of last year, I don't think he's that big a name.
Hey, Will Middlebrooks, he was brought on too. I mean, he was a guy who was a prospect. In fact, I think the Phillies liked him when he was in Boston, and then he just kind of fizzled out. Are they looking at him to be kind of a backup on this team, a role player, or is he kind of a long shot?
I tend to think he's on the long shot end. He can play third base, he can play first base. he played first base today. But when you look at the other types of players on the roster, the Adam Rosaleses, I think they're much more versatile. They have a much greater track record, and for Middlebrooks to really make the roster, I think he's going to have to really impress. He was at one time a very top prospect, and I remember when he was called up by the Red Sox for the very, very first time. It was a big deal, and he did have a nice season here or there. But for the most part, he never really met that potential. So I think he's kind of buried on the depth chart at this point, and I think he'd have to show something pretty significant this spring to get the chance. Now, he played in 22 games last year with the Texas Rangers, batting .211. The year before that, 10 games with Milwaukee, batting .111. And if you look at his career stats, I mean, aside from when he hit .288 his rookie year with the Red Sox, and he had 15 home runs in 75 games. They thought they had something, but he kind of fell off after that. He never really has been the same. So he is in camp. Players like him can be useful. Someone like that you could put a AAA, and it wouldn't be a bad person to have called up in the case of an injury, but I think he's got to climb ahead of Adam Rosales, because I tend to think Rosales is going to be the backup infielder if I had to pick it today. Who was also going to be the backup outfielder, in that ilk. So I think he's kind of buried at this point.
Frank Klose is in Dunedin with the Phillies. So Frank, what is the next stop for you as you're down there for a couple of days covering the Phils?
Well, tomorrow I'll be at the home opener at Spectrum Field, and as the Phillies return home, so you'll probably get to see a lot of the starting lineup tomorrow. I think they'll do that for opening day here in Clearwater. So we'll see what they have.
All right. You know who's pitching tomorrow?
You know what? I don't have my notes handy, but I forget off the top of my head. Eichhoff pitched yesterday, and the day before that was trying to think who they have going next.
Pavetta today, Eichhoff was yesterday.
Yeah, Eflin is going to take the mound first tomorrow.
Okay, so that's tomorrow, the Grapefruit League opener. Frank, sprinkle in, where are a couple of your favorite Clearwater spots for the listeners who are heading down?
Oh man, there's too many to really pick. I like besides Clearwater Beach, any place on Clearwater Beach is great. You always have the Frenchies. You also have Krabby's. I like Krabby's. There's the Brown Boxer is a Philly bar, which is further down Clearwater Beach. But other places in the area I like Cigar City Brewing in Tampa. It's not that far from the airport, so you can stop there when you get off the plane or on your way back to the plane. I highly recommend that. And there's downtown St. Pete is nice. I mean, there's so much to do here. You can never get it all in one trip. So when you come down, come back next year.
All right, man. He'll be at the home opener tomorrow for Phillies. The Grapefruit League home opener schedule begins tomorrow at it's not Bright House anymore. What's it called? Spectrum
Field. Yes, can't forget the Spectrum.
That's right. All right, Frank. Take care, pal.
Thanks, guys.